Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the dialogue today, looking back at 6 months of the crisis in Sudan, as well as looking forward of how we as a group can identify collective action to address this ongoing crisis. Welcome to those of you here at our global headquarters in Washington, D.C. at Vital Voices, and also welcome to many of you who are joining us online. My name is Alan Friedman. I lead the crisis response team here at Vital Voices in Washington, D.C. And before we turn it over to the panel, I just want to recognize our sponsors and partners in this event: Alliance for Peacebuilding, Darfur Women Action Group, iACT, Never Again Coalition, Refugees International, and of course, Vital Voices. And with that, I'd like to say welcome. Thank you for joining us for today's conversation. And I'm going to hand it over to our moderator, Abdullahi Halaki, who's the Senior Advocate for East Africa and Southern Africa for Refugees International. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you once again to the sponsors. Thank you once again to the panelists for accepting on a very short notice to be with us, to share your insights. And again, thank you to the audience, the ones that are here in the room, and also the ones who are outside. This week again marks yet another grim anniversary in Sudan, this conflict that started 6 months ago. I think in terms of the numbers, over 5.5 million people have been displaced, most of them internally, and over 1 million of them outside the country. We have got half of the population in need of humanitarian aid. Before the conflict, that number was a third. Our groups and others have documented egregious human rights and international humanitarian law violations since the conflict has started. And our sense is, as with many other organizations, this conflict is just beginning, which is heartbreaking to say. But today, with me, we have distinguished panelists. The job of a moderator a lot of the time is proportional to the level and the quality of the panelists that you have. And my job is exceptionally easy today because I have got 4 Sudanese, some online who will be joining with us via video, and some via Skype from the region. And so it is very easy because, again, these are people who live and breathe Sudan because most of them are Sudanese, but also these are people who work in Sudan. Without much ado, I want to introduce to you Ala Al-Karib. Ala, she is the Regional Director of Strategic Initiative for Women in the Horn of Africa, SIHA, and she will be joining us remote. We have Nimat Ahmadi, founder and the president of Darfur Women Action Group. She's running a few minutes late, but she will be joining us in the room. And we have Kuskondi Abdul Shafi, who is a senior regional Africa advisor at Freedom House. But before that, I would want Suleiman Adam, who is a former Darfur refugee and current iACT team member in Kansas City, to give us his opening thought on the situation before we come back to the panelists. Over to you, Suleiman.
Thank you very much, and also thank you for the opportunity. Our friend Al-Fateh from the camp may be having some connection issues, so I will. Sudan is considered one of the countries that suffered by the continuation of the unending wars over the decades, and it goes back to the government by the government that governs Sudan since the independence, by dictator ways, so that they can stay in power as long as they can. Under these circumstances, Sudanese people have suffered a lot from the marginalization, which at least caused so many revolutions and formed so many parties. So after nearly 7 months of the fighting between the RSF and the Sudanese government, which harvested thousands of innocent civilians' souls under the name of democracy, In addition of the
Apologies for the technical hitches. Apologies. Seems like we've lost Suleiman. Director, with your permission, we can proceed. I think let's switch inside here. Are you back?
can you hear me? Because
Yeah, we can hear you, Suleiman.
Okay, I'm sorry. I can hear you all clearly. Okay. So so many people have left their homes and lived in displacements, in refugee camps, and become homeless, and have been and their homes have been occupied by the militia or of the RSF. Their luggage, cars, banks, all have been looted. Girls have been kidnapped, children lost, and there's no trace for life at all. So nowadays, in the camps in Chad, have become crowded by new arrivals. Although there's other refugees have been in the camps for 20 years. So these people, the new arrivals and the people being in the camps for nearly 20 years, live in very bad life, life which has very few needs that been taken care of. There's lack of nutrition, education, healthcare, shelter to keep themselves in a good situation, and decreased threat from all sides. Vaccines for the children, and the level of ignorance is increasing, and schools are very rare. The education level is very low, and there's no opportunities for work, and the situation is really catastrophe. There's few shelters for some people, and these shelters are very hot in the summer, and also it's very cold in the winter. So there's also like heavy wind.
We apologize
In the
again.
IDP camps. Okay, so
Suleiman is determined for me to make 20 apologies before the end of this show. We apologize again, Suleiman. I know it's not your fault. I think it's the reality of our internet connection. I just want to make very clear that what Suleiman is saying is a statement prepared by Al-Fatah Tarbush, who is a Darfur refugee who is living currently in Eastern Chad. So I just wanted to make that very clear. So he was reading on his behalf. Kuskondi Abdul Shafi, I want to start with you because there's no better place to start, and there's no better person to give us not just the professional reality, but also the personal reality. To you, this is not just 9 to 5, but it is 24/7, 365 days, and probably over 20 years. Access to information is an incredibly difficult thing in Darfur. What have you been hearing from your networks, and what is the current state of play? And, you can be vulnerable. This is a safe space.
Yes. Thank you, everyone, for taking time to come, everyone here in person and everyone who is following us online. Thank you, International Refugee International, and also Vital Voice and partners for organizing this event, and also for inviting me to come to speak here. It is really an honor. I just to revert back to your question, Abdullahi, of course, I remember we were in the school at the university in 2003, And in the morning, we received an information for one of our roommates who was at that time in the North Darfur that the bomb hit the house and nobody left. He's the only one person in the family remained. And based on that, after a few months, we hear that everything is destroyed in Darfur, and we started a student movement. At that time, there was no network, and there is no very much advanced internet connections. So knowing the information is only people flee from the village, come to the town, and they call you on landline, and you can speak and listen to them on what's happening. In April 15, Darfur is taken back to the same 2000 event, despite the heavy, investments on the communication and telecommunication access to internet. The main objective of the perpetrator in Darfur, which is mainly the RSF, they first targeted the internet and the network tunnels, which means the hitting, the telecom satellite antennas and taking the machines there, and they destroy everything. So the whole people from population from South Niala all the way to border of Jenena are held incommunicado since April 15. And what was happening within that, where we don't know in the whole this space of time, the whole main service sector is being destroyed, meaning that hospitals, so I am from Central Darfur, and Zalingi is our capital city. In Zalingi city, even the hospital not only just looted and burned, even the beds of the hospital is being taken, meaning that it really there is nothing. Not only the hospitals, the banks, and markets being looted, but also burned, and then everyone who was associated for those institutions are immediately and individually targeted. And after that, meaning that the whole means of survival of the population in those areas completely destroyed with no communication. All the roads are being blocked, meaning city to city, for the first 3 months, meaning that people who were in Al Junaina, they can only have one option, to flee all the way to Chad. But it was very difficult for people who are in Mitmeri, and Morne, Zalingi, and other cities where it's very far from the border, and it is high risk for people to travel all the way. What happens to this population in this space? Meaning that everyone in Darmasalit, which I'm talking about, hundreds of thousands, if not, around 400 or 500,000 of native population Masalit are being ravaged, meaning that a systemic killing of this population. And the rest who are being able to run, they just flee. Some of them actually moved. They spent more than 3 months to reach out to the Chadian border. And within that travel, most of those people have died either thirsty or, it become very difficult for them to arrive to safe places. The roads that are blocked, the communication that's blocked, but also those who are living in the camps, meaning that the target was the city. So the first 2000 war, the target was the rural village, and those people fled to the city. This second wave of war, the target was city, people who have houses living in the city. And these people have to move from the city to the camps, meaning that the virtual repatriation and the whole city center being looted, destroyed, and and people are being targeted as individuals based on their ethnic affiliation. Everyone who has everything that is useful is being taken from them. Even, those who use cameras or phones to be able to document, they are all looted one by one, meaning the camp will be confined. And then every leaders will be taken in the morning and they say you have to pay protection money. And protection money is like 300 million, which is equal $50,000 per week. So everyone, whatever you have, you can pay in cash, you can pay in kind. So meaning that in the past 2 months, everything that these people have to survive is being taken. And the movement not only within the region, but also within the city, like everywhere there is just checkpoints, and all of those people are living in a very horrible situation. So situation is very there, and I don't know how to explain in word, but really I I can't find a real word to describe. I just want to say that the situation is there, and I definitely feel that when it comes to the crisis of Darfur and Sudan at all, this time the world is not fair at all. The response, the magnitude of the crisis, the numbers that OSHA and UN showing of just people fled in just a short period of time. The satellite image that we see, the mass destruction, and our response is really deafening. And I just want to say that that is what I feel, and that is what is really reality in the situation with regard to what's happening on the ground.
No, brilliant. It's heart-rendering, and like you said multiple times, it is, dire, and the response does not match the need on the ground, even if it's compared to the 2013 situation. I want to switch gears and speak to Hala Al-Karib. Hala, I think you've heard what Abdul Shafi has described, but there is also a very deliberate, if you will, intentional targeting of women and, the widespread conflict-related sexual violence. And it seems like in this conflict, the way the parties to the conflict are executing this conflict, gender is a very, very specific element to it. Of course, you work with Siha. Just give us a sense of what it is what makes this very, very bad, especially for the women.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me clearly?
We do.
Excellent. So thank you for hosting this important session, and thank you for having all of us here. It's it's very unfortunate. It has been extremely sad. It has been over 6 months since the beginning of this stage of ugly war that is happening in Sudan. But allow me to say that Sudan has been in a status of war for the past 20 years, and these atrocities that's currently happening in Sudan it's not happening in a vacuum. It's happening. It's an accumulation of layers and layers of impunity and enabling perpetrators, and sometimes rewarding the perpetrators, and giving them a sense of being invincible, because this is basically what happened in Sudan. I mean, as much as personally, I'm extremely sad and heartbroken, but I'm someone who worked in conflict areas in Sudan for the past 20 years. And I understand really well, the level of impunity and the fact that the 18-19 revolution, although it was very promising and everything, it didn't go far enough, to address the underlying challenges that Sudan is encountering. Wars, in my view, kind of identified, with some of the problems, and I think this is why we are in this situation, and in this time I think, Sudanese political elites and actors, they should not, even civilian politicians, they should not be exempted, but I also think the international community should as well be held accountable, especially, policy makers and, actors who were trying to fix the situation in a way that, to suppress the fact that, people, they continue to die. It never stopped for a minute in Darfur. Sexual violence has never stopped happening, not a single day. The growing and continuous destructions of the infrastructure, of Darfur villages, of, the transformation that happened to communities from being productive communities, the transformation that happened to women. And I'm not talking about a small number of people. I'm talking about large number of people, from being productive, from being women that has agency, have access to educations, into IDPs deprived of the basic needs, and so it's the crisis was expanding in front of our eyes, and that's the sad part about it. Many of us kind of turned a blind eye and let Sudan down, in my view. Right now, we are going through, as usual, a very, very brutal war, that mirrors, what happened in Darfur in the early days of the conflict, and I was there during the first, 2.5 months, and knowing exactly the nature of the perpetrators, and I have written about that in an article for the New Humanitarian. The first thought that crossed my mind that I need to get, the girls out. I need to make sure that, my daughters, my nieces are out of Khartoum, because I know the nature of the perpetrators. I know the nature of the gender war, and I know the fact that, the strategy, that has constantly been used, and it was used in Khartoum. It was used in Khartoum in June 3rd, in the middle of Khartoum, when they dispersed the sitting. That was like a small, kind of gave us a test of what has been happening, so, and sure enough, the first report that we have received on sexual violence, cases, we received it on April 15th. The first sexual violence, the first hours of the conflict, they entered, RSF has entered into a family home, and they raped, a woman, and at that point of time, Khartoum was still occupied, so when the people, they gathered, they fled. The second incident, it happened just in the same day, about 3 p.m., just a few kilometers. And from there, the sexual violence incidents, and sexual violence crime, it never stopped until today. It happened across the country. It happened particularly in Khartoum. It happened in Niala, in South Darfur. The brutality of the sexual violence crime. Girls have been held hostages inside dorms for days, subjected to torture, subjected to sexual slavery. We have accounts of activists who saw women shackled and moved from one place to the other and sold, in locations within North Darfur. I'm very sure all of you have read the reports by Human Rights Watch, but we have colleagues and we have friends also in El Junaina. And what they told us, about what happened there, it's unbearable. And we have accounts of women who committed suicide due to the level of torture they have experienced. So it's horrific, when it comes to sexual violence. It's horrific, the price that women in Sudan continue to pay, for the past 20 years. Just a couple of days ago, I have reports about sexual violence survivor who wanted to report, what happened to her, and she was kicked out, from the police station. An IDB woman who wanted to report. So it's a consistent act of undermining what's happening to women. And it's very unfortunate that all the agreements, all the political process, all the narrative and the discourse that has been happening, it's kind of undermine and brush away, the level of violations that Sudanese women are experiencing, for the past 20 years and continue to do. The economic devastations on women are great, women, they have lost everything, of course, and we're talking about 4.5 million IDPs. This is the largest IDPs community in the world. This is happening again. It's a very grim reality where, there is no access to sexual and reproductive health medications or response. It's a struggle. It's really a struggle, under the current circumstances with the, a very small amount of funding. We are, as activists, we are collecting, resources among ourselves. We recently launched a campaign, try to donate sanitary pads, because Sudanese women, they don't have access to sanitary pads to maintain their dignity under the circumstances. And, we sit and we talked about reusable pads, but the issue is people, they can't afford soap, and there is difficulty in accessing clean water. It's really, it's a nightmare situation, but we have been neglected, as Sudanese, I believe. It's heartbreaking, when we accomplish change and thrive, we were celebrated. Going through hard times, totally pushed to the bottom of the list. Yeah. So
No, thank you so much, Hala. I think at this stage we are running out of superlatives to describe the situation in Sudan, but specifically the situation of Sudanese women. Nimat, I'm sure you've got something to say about this, but I want to add that, and also because I'm mindful of the time, Sudanese women, like Hala said, were celebrated. They were at the forefront of dethroning Omar Hassan al-Bashir when they did that, when they were in the front line. But now it is the turn for others to stand up for them. But do you see that, and also what role, if any, can they play in finding resolution to this crisis? Many of those talks that have been held, women have been excluded. What do you see as the pathway for women? For the audience, before I hand it over to Nimat, if you've got any question, please drop it so that we'll have a, at the end, question and answer where the panelists will share some of their insight. Over to you, Nimat.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. the organizers, and also our audience who are present with us here, and those of you who are online. It is really sad and dismaying that many of you, like my colleague Dan, from who we have worked for over the years, other colleague from Vital Voices, that after I have never thought that after 2 decades we will be coming back to speak about the genocide in Darfur and the crisis in Sudan the way it is right now. Speaking about the situation in Sudan right now, it is the most dangerous place to be a woman, regardless of where you are, whether you are in Khartoum, in Darfur, or in Kordofan, because of the nature of the barbaric and systematic attack that directed against women. Unfortunately, this war currently is being fought over women's bodies, and it should not be this way. We should have seen outrage around the world. The women of Sudan, as we all know, in 2019, despite their unwavering commitment and the outstanding leadership that they have shown, not only within Sudan, but across the globe. I think we all remember how women stood up and they were in the forefront of the movement for peaceful change. They are protesting, demanding change, putting their agendas together, but they also are feeding and supporting those in need. Unfortunately, when the interim period or the transition government was formed, the shortly lived transition government, women were left behind. And it was disheartening. It is not only the Sudanese leaders, but also the international community have not prioritized women's participation. And it is time and time again, women of Sudan have shown us over the 20 years of the crisis in Darfur, women have been the most impacted, where rape and systematic sexual violence have been used as a weapon of war. Women have demonstrated an outstanding resilience and courage, resolve, to take charge in resolving their community's issues, to serve as a spokesperson, and to fight for the right. Again, those who are working and bringing peace to Darfur have not included women or prioritize or try to invest in those qualities that demonstrated by the women in Sudan. And even now, 6 months ago, when the internationals, the diplomatic missions, the international NGOs had to walk out of Sudan, of course, it was not safe for them. Millions of people were left trapped, facing death and destruction. Who was there for the rescue? It is the women of Sudan again, who step up voluntary work, the community-based organizations, civil society leaders, volunteers, who encourage everyone to come out and to provide humanitarian assistance, trying to fill the vacuum that was left, but it's impossible with limited resources to do. And now, again, there are negotiations going on in Jeddah for the last 6 months. Women are not included. The news that we are reading, the information that we've seen, people who have been rescued are documented by women. I'm a part of like 2 prominent groups, the Darfuri Voices, Darfuri Women Voices. It is a group of Darfuri women from across the Sudan who are focusing on documenting atrocities in Darfur and the Sudanese women against war. Every night we spend hours and hours receiving information. This is happening in this neighborhood. We need money for transportation. We need support. We need people to come out around the clock doing this. And I feel really dismayed to see that women are not included in negotiation of ceasefire agreement. And unfortunately, they made it about the generals. It's not about the people of Sudan. And I think with the current situation going on, we must think twice before we can approach the resolution for the crisis in Sudan. I think the women of Sudan have demonstrated that they're not only supposed to be recognized because of their plight and suffering, but also because of their leadership. And they need to be on the table not as victims or survivors, but as leaders and policymakers who are shaping our policy at all levels, from crisis response, humanitarian aid, the conflict resolution, accountability, and anything has to do with the crisis in Sudan. And that will not happen unless we demand it.
Thank you so much. We have Al Fatah Tarbush on the line. Technical conditions allowing, we will give him a minute to be able to. He's a Darfur refugee currently living in the refugee camps in eastern Chad. Al Fatah, can you hear us? Abdul Fattah, unmute, please. Apologies for the technical glitches again.
Yeah.
Good. We have him now.
Thank you so much. Yes.
Yeah, Abdul Fattah, can you hear us?
Yes, I hear you.
Abdul Fattah, so what is the condition of, Sudanese who've been displaced and are now living in Chad? What is the current condition, your current condition, and the condition of many Darfuris who've fled to Chad?
Thank you so much for you and for all the people over there, and thank you for the hosting. Yes, the situation, of course, here in the refugee camps and in IDPs camps in Sudan, let me to divide it to like 3 or 4 sectors. The first sector is the health sector. The second sector is nutrition sector, and education sector is third one, and then generally life of the refugees. Let us start by the life. Of course, people here in the refugee camps and in the IDPs camps, the living condition is similarly a little bit different between the refugees and between the IDPs in Sudan. In refugee camps here, of course, we live like half life of the human, and this life is poor of life needs. It's just human, human, they living under some, let me say, a bad condition, but instead of killing, instead of losing, instead of anything, that we accept to live this kind of life where your house is composed from the grasses as a shelter to keep your children and to keep yourself from the rain, and it's house where you can sleep, where you share the insects, you share the snakes, you share the harm insects together.
I'll do what I do. I'll apologize again for the technical glitch. Yeah. It's also just the reality of, how getting information is very difficult. This is not a temporary glitch. This is a condition that majority of them live through. Suleiman, over to you, please.
Sorry?
Go ahead. You are explaining how the living conditions are unbearable.
Yeah. So when it is winter, we really don't have things to keep us warm, and when it is hot, we have no shelters, and we deal with the situation. And this kind of situation is leading, or it helps to create some diseases for the different seasons. And of course, don't forget, sometimes there's a heavy rains which damages also that hearts and we live for several months in a dam areas where everything it looks like dam and water are everywhere. So it's so hard. So this kind of life is really unbelievable and unacceptable. But what can we do? Because we have no choice. You have been killed and you have been tortured in your country, and you have been forced to leave your homeland where you were living with your full dignity and live with your own things and with own power, and you left your country so you can accept this kind of life. At least it is better than nothing, because if it is, we cannot be here until now. We may die, although we are dying daily because of different many circumstances, but others are still, and the majority are still is living there and dealing with this kind of situation. And here we are. For the necessary life needs, I think these are the points. The education, of course, the education, since we left with our country, and we live here in the camps for 20 years. Believe me, 20 years. Nearly 1 million point 500 of refugees in Chad. Let me say in Chad. This is before the new arrivals. Within the 20 years, we only have 100 university graduated. That means this is really means of education, and it leads us to ignorance, which it's also difficult for the future, because how can a mass of the people like this and they don't have people who they obtain high quality of education? This is besides the primary schools and the middle schools and the higher secondary schools. And there's many problems facing the families, because if you have 2 or 3 boys or daughters or mix, you want to take them to school, they need school materials, and at the same time they need school shirts, they need exercise pants, shoes, they need everything. But it's difficult for the families to get it, because their parents here are living in the condition that, or in the places that they have no companies to work, and there's nothing you can get the money. Where can you get the money? And the school needs fees to pay. So they might share all the parents of the house to try to work for 1 or 2 persons to evaluate for them, or to make things valuable for them, like the needs of education, and that one will continue. At the same time, the other, let me say, if the family composed of 10, so the 8 will work hard to push those to go to school and to pay for them the pieces, and while the others are keep working hard to bring money for food, to bring money for school needs, to bring money for other life needs. So it is very difficult situation that we live beside the education, and like this, many generations, of course, they can be lost, because at last now we have 20 years and the problem is still existing there, and we don't see the solution in the near future. That means other generations will lose the education and will feel in the ground of ignorancy, and ignorancy environment is destroying the environment of the coming generations.
Al-Fatah, thank you. Fatah, we are running short on time. Stay on the line. We'll try and bring you in. Just to say that, it is not just those who are living inside Sudan, but it's also those who have now, for over 20 years and counting, living outside the country, who are bearing the burden. It's not just the current generation, it is also the future generations whose lives are being stolen. So to whichever order that you would want to go, I think Nimat and Hala, what should be done to include the women in these processes of resolving the crisis in Sudan? What should happen? What do you think the regional actors, what do you think the UN, what do you think the United States and other actors need to do for women to be included in the mediation processes? Start with you, Nimat.
Well, what need to be done to include women? I think at the moment, with the ongoing situation, I think protection is a primary need. The people of Sudan, and particularly in Darfur, there is a need for a robust intervention to protect civilians and also to allow humanitarian access to those in need. Otherwise, millions will be founded soon, because there is no production, there is no humanitarian aid coming from outside of Sudan, and those left is right now is running out. To include women, I think protection and prevention of violence against women must be applied, but also inclusion of women at all level of whether it is humanitarian response or conflict resolution, because I think women are, in any nation, are 50% of the country's population. The Sudan is not a different case. And these are not just women, but people who have demonstrated an exceptional leadership in resisting, and the resilience is unmatched. I think we must understand that to resolve the crisis in Sudan, women must take the lead and be part and parcel of all solution. And participation is not a privilege, but it is the right for women to participate. And that is also for us who are advocating and speaking to policymakers, we must make it clear that without women, I believe the women of Sudan will change the face of Sudan because of what they have done and because of their resilience. But disempowering them by just excluding them in all these venues. Right now, even the initiative that civilians who are trying to bring civilian government back, they have not included women at all. And so I think the international community need to create an enabling environment for women to be able to participate, protect safety and security of the women. And then their inclusion must be prioritized at all times. And also having within the mediation team, most of those who go to negotiation are men from both sides, stakeholders, actors, mediation teams. They don't include women. Then since they don't include women in their delegation, they also are not prioritizing women coming out. So I think we must make that clear, that if a solution to be made, women have to be there because they demonstrated that they are capable and that they are committed. And when solution made with women being a part of it, they are sustainable and durable.
Hala, over to you. Is there anything that you would want to add on women inclusion and, as well as addressing some of the immediate priorities inside and outside the country?
Absolutely. I think, in addition, definitely to the stating, the obvious, what Namat has said, as women activists, through our work, we have been speaking about, the issue of militarization and disarmament for a very long time. And, strongly believe that if we're going to address issues of women, peace and security, we have to speak about the growing militarization, that has been happening in Sudan over the past, I don't know how many years, and that has exacerbated, the violence against women, and it made it very easy and it normalized it. And I'm someone who strongly believes that women issues are national issues. They are part of the national agenda, and that has been a challenge. In all the processes, that has been been adopted towards resolving Sudan complex problems, is that the women agenda has always, and issues has been always dealt as accessories or peripheral issues, and they were not really looked in as this is a country who actually, struggling with a very deep and strong and systemic violations that has been happening against women and girls systematically. Bashir regime has really damaged our Sudan legal framework, legitimized discriminations, legitimized sexual violence, legitimized criminalization of women, and those type of ideologies, they actually been normalized and spreaded even to those quote unquote pretends that they are anti, Bashir's regime. When it comes to the challenge of, human rights of women, they kind of dismiss it or try to go around it and things like that. So I think that's the engagements of women in the security sector reform is also critical because it affects us. Every, living in an environment that's occupied, by militarized groups, it really affects women, affects girls, it affects, their future. Suleiman spoke about sorry, not Suleiman, my
Fatah,
brother from
Al-Fatah.
yes, exactly. Fatah from Chad spoke about education, which is now, it's really a very scary issue. UNICEF, they said there is 19 million kids out of school in Sudan. It's very, very scary. We are a young nation. So if you are allowing 19 million children to be out of school, we cannot speak about stopping the war. We cannot speak about transiting to peace, So that's really a very, very serious issue. And we have, Sudan is a country that has a long history of girls' education. It's very unfortunate, to see a massive numbers of girls has been dragged into child forced sexual exploitation of child. They call it child marriage. I call it sexual exploitation of children from the age of 12. People has to give away their girls for marriage because they can't afford, an education, and there is no education, as well at this point in time. So this is one of the most actually dangerous in the long term issues.
Thank you. Thank
In
you,
terms
Hala.
of the
We are running
participation,
short of time. Sorry to cut you short. I want to give the audience, if they have any, yeah, I defer to you.
Yeah, in order also to, just to add to what Hala said, for women to be able to participate, women need resources and also need access. And without that, women cannot be able to participate. They also need capacity to be supported to articulate their agendas. And one of the most important part, like when negotiation about security issues, women are excluded, but when security breakdown, women are the most impacted. And I think in the future or not even now, a security sector reform should be an issue that engendered, and women should be part of that, and they should have their own agenda about how the militarization in Sudan can be resolved, and also the reform of the security sector reform and reintegration of the national forces and inclusion of women in those sectors is of a paramount importance. Thank you.
To the audience, we've got very few minutes. If you have any question, go ahead, and there is a roving mic that will come your way. That would be nice.
Eileen Shields West, and I am affiliated with Refugees International. Well, thank you for doing this, first of all, because there's so many fires going on right now in the world, and we tend to lose our concentration to Sudan. I did visit Darfur in 2003, so I know exactly what you're talking about. And as you said, 20 years ago, it's still going on. But are both sides responsible? I'm trying to figure out, when you talk about the conflict now that's brewing and causing all of this devastation, are both sides at fault in this conflict? And also, I know we don't think of the UN as effective anymore, unfortunately, but do you want it to do something in this conflict? Do you think if it would speak out, it would have an effect? I just wish we could get the UN to be more of a voice and a body of resolution. And I just want to know if you think the UN can do anything in this situation.
No, I think I just want to add that we're running short of time, but also, I want to give you a chance, Abdul Shafi, tying, the role of the UN, but more broadly, what can and should be done and by who to unlock this crisis in order for us to go into how can we resolve, because we see the numbers, we know the issues, or at least we think we know. How can that be done? And if you tie it to the question on the role of the UN, but also, are there actors who, bad faith actors who are benefiting from this crisis?
Yes, and thank you. And just to remind everyone, Darfur is a region where UN has had its largest peacekeeping mission in the world until 2016, 2017. That itself tells you the magnitude of the crisis itself. And all of these 20,000 left in vacuum. When we had those 20,000 military peacekeeping forces, we actually had an state, and we had a public sector and had local governance. Now, none of that exists, meaning that all the victims that were protected somehow by the UNAMID are now on the hands of their perpetrators. And that is where the dangers come from. The story of why conflict is in Genena and why it's in Zalingi, why it's in Kutum, why it's in Kapkabia, is because it is a clear ethnic cleansing. And these people are unprotected. They are going through all of this, including using the sexual violence as a tool of war is one of the things. Looting, systemic. You can't have, people just take your car keys and give to them because you are not in their ethnicity. So what I want to say with regard to the situation and the risk, civilian protection, and as both of my colleagues mentioned it, in Darfur is the key first need for any space to be available for political participation. In this situation, people are living every hour as their last hour of their life. They're looking for thinking about how to survive an hour. There is no way anyone's thinking about something else when your kids, your family are in immediate danger at any moment. The second thing that I really want to say with regard to who and what, and particularly in Darfur, and just to come back to the question of who, what, and who is responsible with the mass atrocities. To be clear, SAF doesn't exist in Darfur, particularly the Sudan Armed Forces. They are in South Darfur for a bit. They are in the camps currently in Genena, a city which is fully destroyed, all the native ethnicities being cleared. They are in the camp. They are still there, meaning that they are indirectly or directly actually playing a negative role with regard to civilian protection. They are not able, they are not responsible, and they were part of the crime before. But the main forces that committing atrocities, particularly in Western Central Darfur, South Darfur, Kutum, and all those areas, those forces are operating under RSF. And that is where the problem comes. If you take the narrative of war in Khartoum, it is actually South RSF fighting. But when you come to Darfur, it is RSF ethnically cleaning some ethnic groups in Darfur. And that is why there is a confusion when you try to interpret the dynamics of conflict in Khartoum in some areas and to come back to explaining Darfur. Yes, there is new ethnic violence in South Darfur between tribes, where some are affiliated to SAF, some are affiliated to us. There is indiscriminate targeting of the bombing of the SAF in some of the civilian areas that are also explained as having a racial base. But generally, all the on-ground control and targeting and atrocities and looting are all done under the auspices of RSF. With regard to who to do, but for me, I think the main key is to reduce the world's running to create incentive for violence in Sudan. And that is the political incentive, but also economic incentive of warlords. And that means that there is always other international key personals that have an interest in Darfur. And now, you can't imagine in Darfur, AK-45 is cheaper than a kilo of sugar. Where these guns come from? And why is it so easy to access? How? So I think there is something missing within our policy regime to address the crisis. One, there is a very shallow understanding about civilian protection as the key issue, who is going to agree and how that will happen practically. And the same approach that is being used in 2003 to have, there was a gradual AU forces, and there is no interest with regard to international community to act on. And this will lead into the complete, until it has become too late for that to happen. Because you can't have an eight worker go to work there if you don't have anybody to protect them. Nobody goes to work. All of these people, there is no safe way for them, all of them, to come to cross border, to come to Chad to receive service, meaning they die there, or what is the answer for that question? It is not answered. And that is why I keep saying that, the failure of our response system is because there is no conducive, cohesion, coordinated ways to really diagnose what is happening in Sudan, particularly what is happening in Darfur, what is happening in Kordofan, to design a policy approach that is responsive to the reality on the ground. It is not there. And I think that's time to reframe the narrative around the conflict and really create a more consistent approach. First of all, justice and accountability is being mentioned so far, and I see the UN new Commission of Fact-Finding that is being formed. I see that as a positive response. But how this fact-finding can go to Al Janeena right now, take pictures of all of these exclusives, where they come from, and, find out who's been supplying that. There's no way they can do that, And I think there is where you need something on the ground for those investigations to happen and be able to hold those who are responsible for this very egregious crime, who are still continue to commit every day, to be held accountable before we come to talk about, how the political engagement, how the policy process will be, who is the, relevant actors. And that is where the political incentives come from. The political incentives come from when you recognize the most violent actor to call them in Jeddah or somewhere to talk to them because they have forces to do violence. Yes, in peace-wise, yes, you need to have some sort of conversation, but why don't you give the same value for non-violent actors to have? So why it takes so much time to recognize, a small group who have a legitimate cause, but they don't have guns? Why is it so difficult for our world to understand, that there is power without violence? And I think that is where there is a key approach problem with regard to how diagnosis is happening, how approach is happening, who is being selected to do what. And I think that is where it really kind of brings back to rethinking, reframing and the intervention, kind around and narratives around the situation in Sudan. And that is our work, working for international organization, all of us. I think we really also need to do our work, homework, and be able to get more connected to what's happening in the situation there. Thank you.
No, thank you. Thank you again. Give it up.
I think we still haven't
Yeah, make it within 1
UN
minute.
is obligated. We have the UN Security Council. They have so many instruments. They have the responsibility to protect doctrine. They also do have all these international laws. Under international laws, humanitarian aid is not negotiable. It is the right for the people who are in need to be, and the UN is supposed to be there. But we have to hold them accountable in terms of protecting civilians, opening access, but also changing the approach, the way they approach Sudan. They always approach Sudan in a way that a traditional mechanism, conflict resolution mechanism, but this is not a case of civil war. It is an atrocity prevention. It is the powerful who are going after the powerless, and it's been going on for years. For instance, the situation in Darfur. We've seen how the crisis resolved in Liberia, in Rwanda, in former Yugoslavia. When genocide involved, that genocider will not negotiate peace. So I think the priority should be given to protection of civilians, humanitarian access, and then accountability should follow. These three steps will create an enabling environment for peace to take its course. But I don't think any kind of negotiation will bring peace right now with the situation in Sudan. And I think the UN is responsible and the UN security, but we haven't spoken up. I think the reason our leaders are turning a blind eye because there is no outrage, there is no more voices. And I remember the Save Darfur Coalition, both Dan and I were proud to be a part of that movement. It is a movement of citizens who are speaking and taking charge and holding their leaders accountable. And I think we need to do that mobilization again, to hold them accountable to their own instrument, to their own policies, and to their own legal obligations to take charge in resolving this. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Give it up to the panelists. It's not an easy thing to do. We ran over by a couple of minutes. Apologies again. It's just shows you the depth, the complexity, and also how important an issue is that you can't disentangle some of the many moving pieces. To our guests from Kampala, from Ala and Fatah from Chad, and Suleiman, thank you so much for your time. And I don't think we would have been able to do it without our technical folks. They like being behind the cameras. They made it really easy. It's not easy to do, live event, but thank you so much. And I hope all of us have learned something. And once again, thank you so much.